repeal it, and I'd point to the Constitution of the state of Illinois. That thing is a complete violation of Article 10, Paragraph 3. It's clear language, and what we did violated our Constitution. But the fellows who did it, the people who were in charge, they were clever. They made the whole thing stick together. You challenge any one part of that funding bill, the whole thing collapses. They've silenced all of us once again, and that needs to end in our state.
Some of you have brought up already, Senator Biss, you did, the funding element. I think Mr. Pritzker did as well. The new education funding formula, it's called an evidence-based, drives more dollars to low-income students. But the state did put the bare minimum of new dollars into the formula. So it's still the same old issue of those who live in wealthier neighborhoods will receive more money. What's the solution? Superintendent Diver.
There's three factors that have to be taken out of the school funding formula if you really want to get it right. You got to take EAV out, you got to take TIF districts out, and you have to take Pt2 out. And until you take that out, you're going to get the same thing. That was the factor when they were trying to pass SB 1. They moved it on to 1947. If you read about passing those bills, you'll see those three factors that come up. You've got to move funding of education away from property taxes. I said that in 1992. I said that you've got to have a designated tax for education. It's got to be in a designated fund. It's got to be attached to your IL 1040, and that's how you fix funding public education in the state of Illinois.
Mr. Hardeman.
Yeah, right now the funding for schools in Illinois is very, very important. It should definitely be a priority, but the way to fund it is in the progressive tax as well. The Illinois state lottery really needs to be looked at a little closer, because just last year I think they put in $696 million in the general education fund. When we talk about funding schools, we have to think about the entire state. But the money should come out of the progressive tax funds right now. But you cannot get a progressive tax, people in Illinois, until you change the Constitution. So that may not happen until 2020. But education will be a priority in the Hardeman Navy campaign. All right.
Alderman Poor.
The thing about education equity, or equity in general, is equity does not mean equal. Equity means spending more money where it's needed. And if we want true education equity, then we must all recognize that this is really just about money. We don't spend enough money in our public schools. That's it. It's not accountability, it's not different teachers' contracts, it's not the other garbage. It just is about money, because we do not bring in enough money to pay for public schools. Number two. Now, I just wanted to say, I would repeal the private education tax program, but also we need to get rid of the Illinois State Charter Commission, which undermines public schools.
Please hold your applause so we can hear what he's saying.
Which undermines public schools. So if you want true equity, it's not just getting more money into the system, but it's recognizing you need to spend more money where it's more needed, where it's most needed, and also knowing that I represent an upper middle class community. If I keep getting more dollars, that's not equity. It's spending money where it's needed and getting the revenue to support it. Thanks.
Senator Biss, you voted for the education funding bill, but if there's still this lag between you did not vote for the education funding bill, okay, explain that. How would you fix it to make sure that there is this evidence-based model as the theory of the bill?
I voted against it specifically because of the voucher program. I'm proud of that vote. I would do that vote 8 days a week. But the rest of what's in the bill was a small and important step in the right direction. What we need is a big step in the right direction. We need to repeal the flat tax provision of the Constitution, bring in adequate revenue in a fair way, and then fundamentally transform our school funding system and property tax system as a result. Now, the amazing thing is that all of us are saying really similar things. The question I would ask is, where have you been? I started running for state representative in 2007, in frankly an affluent district that wanted to hear none of this stuff, not a word of it, saying all of it, banging on doors saying we need a progressive income tax, banging on doors saying we need to reform our school funding formula. I voted for school funding reform years ago, took a lot of political heat at home, but it was the right thing to do. We need not just a person to say the right thing now, we need to build a movement to demand these reforms, because the status quo is helping some people, and they're not going to take what we need unless we force it on them.
All right, some of you have brought it up already, but let's get a reading on the financial transaction tax. Mr. Pritzker, where do you stand? Some call it the LaSalle Street tax. Is this the route to a progressive tax system?
So
I'm opposed to the LaSalle Street tax because I believe that we will ultimately lose revenue and lose jobs as a result of it.
Why?
Because here's what's happened. 10, 15 years ago, there were people on the floors of these exchanges who were hand signaling each other to make trades. Today, there are servers, okay? And these servers, by the way, are leased. So the transactions that are taking place are not taking place on the floor. They're taking place on a server. That server could reside anywhere. If we impose a transaction tax that's single state, it is highly likely that those businesses will simply get up and move to another state that has internet trunk lines. So instead, if you're going to have a transaction tax, it has to be a federal tax. There are other ways for us to raise revenue in this state. I believe a progressive income tax allows us not only to impose that tax upon the wealthy people who are traders who live in Illinois, but also upon the corporations themselves that are the exchanges that are doing business here.
Mr. Kennedy, where are you on the LaSalle Street tax?
Well, I'd point out that most of the trading is done on Wacker Drive and not LaSalle Street. Let's just start there.
Wherever it's done, should we be having tax?
Well, it matters. If you're going to regulate it, you ought to know what you're talking about.
We'll let Mr. Pritzker
I mean,
respond to
I
that.
would say this. I'd like to promise everybody rainbows and swing sets in their backyard, and they're not going to have to pay for any of it. The idea that we're going to go after LaSalle Street and somehow tax all of them is just a fallacy. They'll move that money around faster than we can regulate it. Fact is, you can order from Amazon Prime. They know the router in your apartment or your office. They know your address, and then they're delivering it to your address. If you live in Cook County, you don't have to pay Cook County taxes. We can't friggin' find a way to tax Amazon. We're never going to tax the Merck and the Board.
Alderman Boar, where do you stand on that? The LaSalle Street financial transaction tax, whacker tax, whatever it's called. Where are
So I've been pretty clear in my position on this, including what I answered on the editorial board questionnaires when I ran for re-election as alderman. The thing about taxing behavior is if you just have to adjust the tax based on whether they change their behavior. It's like taxing cigarettes. If you tax cigarettes, people smoke less. That's a desired result. If you want to tax high-speed trading to reduce speculative trading or flash trading, you tax it. I've been on the record from the beginning that if you want to get at the financial services industry, then let's do what New York City does. They have a corporate income tax at the municipal level, which I've proposed, and they also have a specialized tax for the financial services sector, because I think there's more money to be taxed on income than there is on behavior. That's where I've always stood, and I think that's where we should go.
Mr. Hardeman.
Well, there's already a bill, House Bill 453, which talks about the business transaction tax. That tax could bring in $3 billion of new revenue in the state of Illinois, which a progressive tax could bring in $2 billion of new revenue. With a 4-year Hardeman and Avery administration, that's $5 billion of new income here in the state of Illinois. We need to take a serious look at House Bill 453, and I would sign that bill immediately because the rich people, the corporate people, and it's not a slight at nobody, I just want to make that clear. The reality is that rich people have not been paying their fair share of taxes, and the business transaction tax is only a fourth of a quarter. It's not even a big tax. So the businesses choose to leave because we impose a small tax on them. We would have to really have a conversation. As your governor, I plan to lead that charge.
Mr. Matarikis, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah. So pretty much in Illinois, we're taxed on everything. And unfortunately, most of the taxes that we have are on the middle class and the poor. Soda taxes. I don't like those because what do? They attack the poor. We have a income tax that's flat across everyone. The rich don't pay any more than the people that have that take in more. We have a bag tax. We have high property taxes. We have high sales taxes. All those things negatively affect the poor and the middle class. Any new taxes that we raise, because here's an example, need to be lockbox. Because here's an example. We talk about education funding. The lottery was supposed to pay for education funding. Anybody know how much goes to education funding? 24%. It ends up in the general fund, and any new taxes need to be regulated because politicians, unfortunately, don't keep their word. They say they're going to raise money just to raise money to fix things, and those things never get fixed.
Thank you. Mr. Jiber, I don't think we heard from you.
I went on record, said I would support the financial transaction tax. Do I think it's reality? No. And I'll tell you why. Because I sat in the House Appropriate meeting one night, next to the CEO of CME Group. He was asking for a $10 million tax break. I was asking for a paycheck for myself and 90 other people in the state of Illinois that hadn't been paid in 6 months. You know what? He got his tax break. I waited 3 more months. So, you know, it's like this. There's a reality as to what you think is possible. There's a reality as to what will be. As governor, I wouldn't be counting on that revenue. If it happened, I'd sign it, but it has to be less than 0.5%.
And Senator Biss, you did bring it up before, but would you like to weigh in one more time?
I would. I want to make 2 points. First of all, look around at our economy. It is harder and harder to get by. People are finding it more and more difficult to make ends meet. There's a shrinking, vanishing middle class. And yet the numbers say we're richer than we've ever been. What happened? The financial sector has ballooned. And so as the economy has changed, if we want to fund our schools properly, if we want a government that works, we have to change our tax code with it. It's time to tax the financial sector properly, and that means passing a LaSalle Street tax and a Wacker Street tax, if you prefer. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill in the Senate. But I also want to say that Bob's right. We're not going to pass that tomorrow. We've got to organize around that. We have to build power. We have to work together to demand that out of our legislature, and we can't pass the buck. You can say that it should happen in Washington. If that's what you want to do, run for president. You can afford that too. We need to do it here.
Would you like to respond?
As a matter of fact, I would. I want to be clear. Thank you for referring to me once again as wealthy. I want to be clear about something. And that's that no one up here on stage wears any kind of halo. And Daniel, while I appreciate you calling that out, you know, you've accepted PAC money, you've accepted money from special interests, you've accepted money from bankers.
All right, hold your applause, please. Let's have a discussion, please.
And this is,
Right.
and I want to be clear though that you know that I do not believe that they're buying you in any way whatsoever. I believe that they believe in you, and that's why they wrote checks. No, I'm standing up here telling you exactly what it is that I believe in. The one thing you will know about me is that if you elect me, everything that I have told you that I will do is exactly what I will do. There's nobody calling me in the middle of the night telling me I can't do it. There's no special interest that will have funded me that will call me in the middle of the night and say, I'm sorry, we're not funding you for the next election.
All right, Senator Biss, perhaps you should. You started it, so let's finish it. What about that special interest call?
I'm incredibly proud of the way that we have funded our campaign. I'm incredibly proud of the thousands of people who have donated to our campaign. I am proud of the fact that though frankly the establishment thinks I have no chance, and despite the fact that I live a middle-class life, we have been able to outraise everybody else on this stage, unless you count money people put into their own campaigns, for 2 quarters running. That's because of the people of Illinois coming together to build a movement to change our state, and that's the only way we're going to accomplish what the state needs.
All right, thank you. A couple of individual questions. Let's start with Alderman Pawar. As a progressive candidate, why are you not a member of the Progressive Caucus for the Chicago City Council?
Love that question. So I think I've been able to get a lot done in City Council, work on progressive issues. Truthfully, I know what my faults are. I tend to work alone, I don't always build coalitions, but I think that's always been able to afford me the ability to actually pass legislation. I think there has been a lot of personality conflicts between me and the Progressive Caucus, and I own that. Some of it started by me, and some things that are internal. And I don't think it makes sense to air that. I respect them, and I'll tell you one thing. I worked on the task force to pass $13 minimum wage, and I led the effort on paid sick leave, but they were also ones leading out there and organizing around it. So I think we've all played our roles. I'm proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud of my record. There have been some personality issues that came up. I don't think it makes sense to air that in a public setting, other than to say I respect them. I think they respect me. I'll leave it at that.
How do you work then with the state? If you are someone who likes to work alone, how will you expand that role from being a city council member to the head of Illinois?
What I mean by working alone is I've always been able to cobble together the votes to pass things like an independent budget office or paid sick leave. I got here on my own. I knocked on doors. I knocked on doors with my wife. I have volunteers that help me. I've never been a part of any club, and no establishment figures ever helped me. The party's never given me a dime, I've never asked them for a dime. I got here on my own grit and sweat equity. Now, I own my weaknesses, I always have. But I've been diplomatic, I've always worked hard, and I've outworked people. And that's how I'll work as governor.
Thank you. Mr. Pritzker, do you believe it's appropriate to disconnect the plumbing from what many would consider a mansion to receive a $230,000 tax break?
Thank you for asking that question. Here is the truth of that, and that is that we began a renovation project on a home, and we decided to stop that project, and at some point in the future after that, we, like 50,000 other people in Cook County every single year, like Chris Kennedy, like Governor Rauner, and others, asked for a reassessment of the property's value. Not because of that, but just it was a point in which, as you know, we have a very unfair assessment process. We need, and I've discovered how flawed it really is. That, in fact, is why we need to get rid of that system, make sure that we've got a formula that really works for assessing properties, and make sure that people are paying their fair share for their properties. That's what happened in that situation.
If there does need to be a change in the assessment, does that also mean a change of the assessor? Where do you stand on Mr. Berrios?
Yeah, the truth is that that's going to be up to the voters, but I must say that things in the assessment world in Cook County have not been going that well lately, let's all face it. And across the state, this is not just an issue in Cook County, by the way. All across the state, we have got the problem of in poor communities, they are paying the very highest rates. The very highest rates. That is very unfair. I am in favor of more progressive taxes, less regressive taxes. Unfortunately, our property tax system is quite regressive in the state.
So, Mr. Kennedy, you brought your name up. You also did receive a tax break at Wolf Point. You've apparently received also a tax break on your home. Where do you stand? Is that a...
Well, what Mr. Pritzker did and what everybody else who's ever appealed their taxes did are two radically different things. We appeal our taxes. He had his house reclassified as uninhabitable. That's a different thing. I've never even heard of it. I've been in real estate 30 years in Chicago. I never knew you could do that thing.
All right, let's listen.
No, I'm serious. That's like a whole other game.
But you also did receive a tax break.
Let me just finish. He did that. Then he says he's in the house next door, and he appeals that tax. He says, look, I'm living next to an uninhabitable home. Don't put me in that bucket. I never did either.
Hold on.
I have the courage to begin here to tell you that Joe Berrios' system is a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and he should be taken out of office.
All right.
I need to respond to that. I'm sorry.
Of course.
I must say, by the way, that millions of dollars of tax breaks at Wolf Point taken by Mr. Kennedy do qualify, in fact, as tax breaks. So, to be clear, our property, by the way, is no longer on that roll. It was a temporary situation that we, in fact, were doing renovations, stopped that, and are beginning to do those renovations again.
But you do support Mr. Berrios?
No, what I'm suggesting is I'm running for governor, and I believe that the people of Cook County ought to make the decision about who the assessor is of Cook County. I must say, though, things are not going well in terms of assessment of properties, and people who are poor are paying the highest taxes.
And Mr. Kennedy, could you clarify, because you did get a tax break at Wolf Point, so there have been...
That's not true. Well, that's not
Can we
true.
please,
That's
let's
not
listen.
true.
He can explain it.
When Wolf Point was a parking lot, it was assessed as a parking lot. When Wolf Point was a development site, it was assessed as a development site. When Wolf Point was an apartment building, it was assessed as an apartment building. All of those assessments were within the range of their peers. There's no evidence that I got a break outside of what everybody else got. There's no evidence that the taxes paid there were different than any other taxes paid by a similar building, development, or lot anywhere else in the city. It's not true.
All right. Appreciate that. Did anyone else want to weigh in on this issue? Mr. Harbin?
Only thing I want to tell everybody right now, that's why you should vote for me. Hey, I'm
I
just
should
being
have
honest
known.
with you.
All right, I appreciate
That's
it.
one
If
thing
you
I
don't
want to
have a
say.
point to make, let's move on. All
I
right.
have a point to make. I have a point to make, okay? As your governor, let me just be honest with everybody. This is the problem that we have right now. I was born and raised in the heart of the ghetto. I grew up in Avalon Park community, Henry Horner projects. I understand all this. We all agreed to take the gentleman's way out when we ran for governor, but when we take the gloves off, people are not going to be happy about it. I'm glad you're asking these questions. For far too long, the reason I support a progressive tax is because the rich people have been getting to wait too long. You only have 17 billionaires living in Illinois. 17. So if the billionaires vote for the billionaires, they will get 17 votes. The 99% of the progressive Democrats, working class people vote for their own, we will win this election by a landslide. That's my comment.
Superintendent Tiber, did I see that you wanted to weigh in as well?
There's something that's really important for middle-class people who are property taxpayers, and everybody understands that. I don't care if you're in Cook County or in Madison County where I live. There's a factor called EAV. That's your equalized assessed valuation. Taxpayers have to pay that EAV. Every time we give an exemption, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's to someone wealthy. I don't care if it's to someone disabled. I don't care if it's to a senior. Every time there is another exemption passed by the General Assembly, those people who have no exemptions pay more. That's the bottom line of property taxes. So if you want your property taxes to never go down, there's one solution. Cut out all the exemptions. Everybody pays less.
Senator Biss, did I see that you wanted to weigh in on this or no? All right, I have one for you. You're right, because you got a good one coming. You recently did drop your initial lieutenant governor pick, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, after backlash for his support of the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and its inherent opposition of your stance. You did lose support from Congressman Brad Schneider and Jesus Chuy Garcia. What does this say about the consistency of your platform?
I'm also really glad you asked that question. I think there's a fair number of people in this room who've been wondering that. That was a painful episode. Carlos is a remarkable progressive. I was excited to have Carlos on the ticket because of a number of deeply, deeply shared values around Medicare for all, a $15 minimum wage, and fundamentally transforming our economy so that finally it works for the rest of us. And we had a very, very difficult situation that was resulted in a separation. Our shared values on those issues hasn't changed, and I'm thrilled to have Letisa Wallace, not just on the ticket, but here today, the most progressive person running for lieutenant governor, someone who shares with me those views about Medicare for all, someone who's fought for a $15 minimum wage and fought to expand child care. That was a difficult situation, but the values that led to that choice are the values that lead to this choice, are the values that have driven my work in government, and are the values that drive this campaign, and most importantly, are the values that will drive our administration.
I've heard a couple of different stories of why, that one, that you didn't ask him the question, or yes, you did. I mean, how did this erupt into such a problem, and why wasn't it, if it meant that much to you, then why didn't you know about it ahead of time?
Listen, people can have misunderstandings. We had a conversation. He obviously has strongly held views. I have strongly held views. And when those views came under the bright light of a tremendous amount of controversy, we found that we were no longer able to stay together. By the way, on that issue too, we share some important priorities. We share a commitment to justice for Palestinians. We share a commitment to peace. We share a commitment to human rights, and we share a commitment to a two-state solution. And so on all of these issues, from the economic issues that drive this campaign or the questions of justice, there are important areas of agreement. It's a shame that we weren't able to work those out in a way that was satisfactory, but the thing that I think is most crucial is that we have in this ticket a partnership that will allow us to fight not just vigorously, but successfully for those same core progressive issues.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Kennedy, you had received criticism after an event downstate called Mom and Baby. You were late to the event. Some of the moms there at the event felt you disrespected them. You've also been somewhat reluctant to take reporters' questions unless it's a one-on-one setting. Do you have what it takes for a high-profile governor's race?
I hope so. As for the mom and babies interaction, I'd say that the people in Vernon Hills would be shocked to know that they now live in downstate.
Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, truthfully, a number of them were interviewing for jobs with J.B. Pritzker, and a lot of the criticism came out of that job application process. I go to multiple events every day. I've had enormous amount of press exposure. I grew up in a very exposed family, and I'm very comfortable with other people. I don't know what you're looking for in terms of an answer, but I'll take you all on one at a time or all at once. Either way, I'm prepared, so thank you.
All right. Mr. Pritzker, I know we're going to hear it. There's going to be an ad that's going to have the phone call with you and former Governor Blagojevich, where you spoke to him about possibly receiving the job as Illinois Treasurer. What happened there? And why would you have called him when nearly everyone knew at that point that he was in trouble?
Well, I don't think everyone knew, but I will say this, that I made that call because there was an opportunity to do public service, and there was the possibility that the treasurer's office was going to be vacant, and so I had a phone call with him. But to be clear, this is a 9-year-old tape that was leaked to the Chicago Tribune. Clearly, frankly, it's been used already by the Illinois GOP and by Bruce Rauner. It is clear to me, by the way, about a week after I announced that I was thinking about running, actually. I really didn't announce. My name was in the newspaper. About a week after that, Bruce Rauner started attacking me immediately. I think it's clear to me Bruce Rauner does not want to run against me. So this is part of that effort. Now, in my view, as you know, if you listen to that tape, every time the Governor Blagojevich brings up anything to do with money, I reject it. Every time. So we should stop, playing games and using the GOP's endeavor in our primary, and what we should be doing is talking about our priorities for this state and not taking after one another, beating each other up. I have run a positive campaign. You all know that. I have run a positive campaign, and I believe that we ought to be talking about the failings of this governor and not about each other.
Thank you. All right, let's hold the applause. Let's talk about health care. Where do you stand on a single-payer healthcare system, and what's your position on the Illinois version of Medicare for All? Could we start with Senator Biss?
I support single payer. I support single payer on the federal level. I recognize that it is quite likely that the best way to get there is to start by enacting single payer on a state level, and that's why I have always supported doing that in the state of Illinois. I'm for it now. It's part of my platform now. It's something Letisa and I will fight for when we're governor and lieutenant governor. It's kind of cool now, so people get asked about it a lot now. But I was for it long before it was cool. I was first running for state rep in 2007 when Barack Obama and John Edwards and Hillary Clinton were arguing about 3 different non-single payer healthcare plans, and my campaign website says, we gotta do single payer. It's the right thing, it's the right answer, it sucks the for-profit private insurance money out of the system, it's the best way to guarantee universal health insurance, and we need to do it here on the state level. And anybody who says that we thought of, in principle, be for it, but maybe should happen in Washington instead, should run for president.
Alderman Guar, where do you stand on single payer?
So I am in support of single payer, and if I'm elected, that is something that we will move on. The thing that we have to recognize, and the conversation needs to change about healthcare, because single payer healthcare is pro-business, because it drives the cost of small businesses down. So if a small business is paying someone $50,000 a year, they're paying $50,000 plus another 40% on top of it. So it costs the employer $70,000 all in. Now, and it depends on whether you're a construction company, a retail operator, or what you do. Now imagine if you can spread that risk out over 14 million people. You can increase wages, drive down costs, and create new jobs. The only people who are standing in the way of a conversation around single payer are the insurance companies and private interests, and that means we just got to take them on and understand that the whole point of government is us leaning on one another to take care of one another. That's a social contract we have, and that is what single payer will do.
Mr. Paterkas?
Of course we need single payer, but let's take a look. Not a lot of you know that Eric Rauner had an opiate addiction, okay? He went to a Walgreens. He threatened...
What does that have to do with this?
It's all about mental health. And with we need to be on mental health services and criminal justice reform.
I don't think the son of someone is appropriate in this discussion.
No, it is, because here's why it is that someone that was privileged got out and got a deferred sentence and then got the treatment he needed. Everyone should be able to get that treatment, not just the rich and select few. And with single payer, that helps. It helps us fund mental health services. It helps people fight addictions. That's what we need, and it shouldn't be the privileged few that get out of prison sentences and also get the help that they need. I'm so glad that Eric Rauner got the help that he needed. But everyone should have that opportunity. Everyone should get that opportunity, and he's doing quite well right now. Everyone should have that.
Superintendent Diver.
I said yes, I support a single payer, but first and foremost, beyond that, I'm for expanding community care outreach. Because in all of our counties, all 102, there are community health centers there. And these community health centers work. And if you don't believe me, if you've ever went to a university health service center, you've used it, you know it works, you know you get feeling better, you know you get medicine free. That's what we need to be doing in this state. I am not worried about the health insurance companies. I'm concerned about health care. I'm concerned about providing health care for the most vulnerable that can't access it. Whether it's a dentist, whether it's a medical doctor, whether it's getting a toothache fixed or having a fungal infection taken care of. So we're not spending Medicaid money going to emergency rooms, but to community health centers getting it taken care of. If we can get to single payer, fantastic, but we've got to take care of people's health needs now.
Mr. Pritzker, is it doable? Is single payer doable?
So I'm in favor of universal health care across the nation and believe that here in Illinois we need to cover everybody. Nobody on the stage has actually put a plan out there for attempting to get there. I have. It's called Illinois Cares, and the idea here is a public option. You may remember this idea when President Obama introduced the Affordable Care Act, and it got put aside. We need to have a public option in this state to allow people to access the state's healthcare system. So that people who are striving to get to the middle class have the ability to finally get a health insurance plan, and people who are in the middle class can get a break on their private health insurance costs. It's important for us to focus on how we're going to get from here to there. We can do my plan, which is revolutionary. I mean, it has passed in one other state, but the governor vetoed it in that state. We can do it in this state, and we will make sure that we begin to put this state on a path toward universal health care.
Mr. Kennedy?
I absolutely support single payer. I support Medicare for all, but it's a federal program, and waiting for the feds to come to the rescue in this time may take decades. I think there's a way to go about getting single payer in our state. It really plays off the notion of who opposes it. It's the insurance companies. The only force more powerful than the insurance companies are the large employers. I ran one of the large employers. I know what those insurance companies do. It's not insurance. They raise your premiums every year to cover whatever cost they didn't cover the year before. I'm not talking about the standard increases. I'm talking about make goods from the year before. They're simply shuffling paper. We should treat them as such. Bind together the biggest employers in our state. Create one pool for all of them. Then use that pool like the Canadians do to drive down the cost of medicine, to drive down the cost of health care, to allow a public option so the state can step in to that pool and cover everyone.
Thank you. Let's talk about Speaker Mike Madigan. Some say he has more power than the governor. What's your relationship like with the Speaker? Is he someone that you turn to for advice and counsel? If not, how will you get anything accomplished? Mr. Harmon?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to answer the single payer health care question.
But not everybody's going to answer the same question.
I understand, but I do support single payer health care, all right? Now, as far as Mike Madigan, we need a governor that's going to stand up to Mike Madigan and Romney Madigan, okay? If we don't get a governor that's going to stand up to politics as usual here in Illinois, we're going to face the same problems over and over again.
But how will you get anything accomplished?
Well, once I become the governor, I believe Mike Madigan would retire personally, because I don't know if he wants to deal with a guy like me, but since I know he'll be in there, this is the thing. We have to work with him and deal with the policies down there, and I would have to work with Mike Madigan, but I plan to go on the record today to let you know I'm one of the best progressive candidates running for governor that would have to work with the powers that be to get the job done. But I'm not going to fake with the audience. Rahm Emanuel needs to go, Mike Madigan needs to go, and anybody who's been supported by those type of people, they don't need to be running for governor. How you going to stand up to Trump and you won't stand up to Rahm Emanuel? Talk about it.
All right, can we hold the applause, please? Senator Biss, where do you stand? What's your relationship like with the speaker, and what happens if you are the governor and you have to meet with the speaker?
Mike Madigan's been speaker for way too long. He's too powerful. That power has held the state of Illinois back. It's held the progressive movement back. It's held the Democratic Party back. One of the first things I did after I got elected was put in a term limit on leaders' proposal so that you can't serve as speaker for more than a decade. By the way, if he'd had his way, I wouldn't have been elected in the first place in 2010. And if he has his way now, I won't get elected governor either. He won't have his way that time either, is the good news. But here's the thing. I'm from a totally different wing of the Democratic Party than Mike Madigan, but I've also gotten more than 80 bills signed into law, passing key progressive priorities, things that people didn't think were going to happen, things that Mike Madigan didn't originally want to see get done. How did I do that? It's not me. It's us working together. The way to move Mike Madigan is the way to move any politician, which is to build movement-based power so they have no choice but to follow. That's what this campaign is about. That's how this campaign is going to allow us to win. But way more importantly, that's how this campaign is going to allow us to do transformational things in the Illinois General Assembly, even though Mike Madigan is there.
Thank you. Alderman Clark.
The biggest mistake I made in politics, when I left the Progressive Caucus, I made it about personalities. I learned my lesson, because you can never make it about any one individual person. And all we do is talk about Mike Madigan. You simply just reinforce the fact that he's somehow more powerful than everybody else. Now, in City Council, when I passed legislation to make sure that we have one Inspector General, I knew who was working against me. There's someone who'd been in office for 40 years, and other folks have been in office for 20 and 30 years. But if you watch what I said on TV or when I was giving interviews, I never made it about them. Because if I made it about them, I'm reinforcing their power. What I did is I outworked them, and I worked City Council, whipped the votes, and we moved major pieces of legislation. And I asked him, Mike Madigan, I don't know him. He's never done anything for me. I've never asked him for anything. Like I said, I got here on my own, by knocking on doors and with the strength of my community. And that's what I'm up here doing. I have no interest in making this about personalities or making it about one boogeyman.
Mr. Pritzker, what's your relationship like with the speaker?
Yeah, so first thing I'd like to say is that, remember, this is a GOP or Republican talking point. Every single candidate that's up here, when they announced, Amaya Pawar was first, he announced for governor, and the GOP put out a press release and said he's a stooge of Mike Madigan. And then next was Chris Kennedy. He's a stooge of Mike Madigan. Next was Senator Biss. He's a stooge of Mike Madigan. Every single one, it's like a Mad Lib with them. They just fill in the name. You're a stooge of Mike Madigan. This is the Republicans' talking point about Democrats. Now, let me be clear. I have spent a lifetime getting things done for people across the state of Illinois, real things. 230,000 kids who get school breakfast every single day that they go to school because I helped to expand President Obama's program called No Kid Hungry. There are thousands of kids who get preschool and child care in this state because of the work that I've done. And there are more than 60,000 kids every single year that learn to fight bigotry and hatred and intolerance because I helped to build
What's your relationship like with the speaker?
I'm explaining to you that I am an independent. I am somebody who will go to Springfield, who will stand up on the values that I am espousing during this campaign. And I want to be clear, you walk into that room, you don't get to choose. Nobody on this stage gets to choose who the Speaker or the President of the Senate is. They get chosen in their district, they get chosen by the fellow members, one of whom voted for Speaker Madigan on this stage. They get chosen by their fellow members, and then you get to walk in as governor, and you deal with whoever that is. That could be a Republican, by the way. Whoever it is. So you have to walk in on the strength of your values and what it is that you ran your campaign on, and that is why we'll get a progressive income tax under me, because I am completely independent.
Still
I will
didn't
walk
really
in and
answer
not
the
leave
question,
the room.
however.
The relationship is, he's the chairman of the Democratic Party, he's the Speaker of the House. The relationship is whatever when you show up.
Do you enjoy support from him?
There is nobody supporting me that is going to have an effect on my views in this way or I do not know. He is not expressing that to me. I'm just explaining to you that I have a large number of people who are supporting me all across this state. I don't share all of their views, but I presume that they should.
All right, Senator Biss, you did vote for the speaker when you were in the House of Representatives?
I did, and that goes to the answer I gave. I'm from a different wing of the party than him, but I'm also a member of the Democratic Party, and that was the Democratic option for speaker, and I certainly wasn't going to pick a Republican. But I think that last answer was kind of indicative. Just admit it. Madigan's for you. That's fine. That's all right. Why are we hiding about this? I don't think it's helpful to pretend. And you say you're an independent. Yeah, you were an independent in 2012 when you went on the trading floor and said you weren't sure if you were going to vote for Barack Obama for re-election because you had to wait and see who the Republicans nominated. But the question here is who's Mike Madigan for, and the answer is you, and that comes with advantages and disadvantages, and we should all just be honest and direct about that.
Mr. Metzger.
I do need to respond to that. Senator Biss, you ran Mike Madigan's PAC last year. You ran this PAC. Millions of dollars. Come on. No, there is no love here. We all are Democrats. We don't get to choose who the speaker is. He is the Speaker of the House. There's nothing that any of us can do about it except to support leadership term limits, which I do.
So, Senator Biss.
I'm a proud Democrat. I'll say it again. There was an effort by a lot of Democrats, several of whom are on this stage, to fight against Donald Trump and Bruce Rauner in the fall of 2016, and you bet I took a leadership role in that effort. And when I'm governor and Mike Madigan is speaker, I'm going to work with him to advance progressive solutions. The question is, are you from the same wing of the party as Mike Madigan or not? And what I know is that Mike Madigan has taken a position in this race, and people might like that and want to be for Madigan's candidate, or they might not like that and not want to be for Madigan's candidate, but let's just be honest about it.
Mr. Kennedy, what's your relationship like with Speaker Madigan?
I think we should give him a choice. I think he should have the choice between being a property tax appeals lawyer or a state representative. I don't think we have to accept the current situation. I don't think it has to be like this in Illinois. He's a property tax appeals lawyer. He's appealing the property taxes to Joe Berrios. One is head of the state Democratic Party, one's head of the Cook County Democratic Party. The scale of this thing is incredible. The Sears Tower sells for $1.2 billion. It gets $1 billion mortgage on it. They're recorded at Cook County. They're reported in the Tribune and Cranes. The assessor, Joe Berrios, says, oh no, he has alternative facts. It's only worth $579 million. We need to prevent our elected officials from having outside jobs that are adverse to the interests of the body they were elected to serve.
All right, let's talk about Amazon. The Amazon sweepstakes. The mayor and the governor tomorrow are planning a pep rally. Wisconsin spent a pep rally to show their interest in receiving that second headquarters. Wisconsin spent $3 billion in public subsidies for Foxconn. How far should Illinois go? Are there any incentives you would oppose the state giving Amazon or a similar company? Mr. Hartman.
Oh yeah, I put a quote out about Amazon coming to Illinois in the Capitol Facts. Let's see, I'm totally against providing infrastructure funds to Amazon for coming here, and I'm also I plan on giving Amazon a minimum tax break, and I also oppose giving them tax reimbursements once they get here. We need Amazon to build their headquarters number 2 over in Inglewood, over in the Austin community on the west side, or East St. Louis, one of these distressed cities or towns out here. That's what we'd like for Amazon to build their second headquarters, my people. So I'm totally against providing any infrastructure money to Amazon. These Fortune 500 companies are making a lot of money. We need the jobs, yes, and the most important thing we can do here in Illinois is provide them with the brilliant minds and the young, brilliant people here in Illinois.
Mr. Duggar, how far should Illinois go?
I'm proud of the fact that I worked a year ago in August to bring Amazon to southwestern Illinois, where it's got one of its largest distribution centers in all of the Midwest. Over 1,500 jobs are there today, and I'm going to tell you they came for 3 reasons. 1, we did invest in infrastructure. 2, we did provide them with a readily trained workforce. And 3, we expedited the permitting so they could open their doors within 3 months. And if you want Amazon to come here, that's what you're going to have to do. I want to bring them back to southwestern Illinois. I want them to expand in East St. Louis or on the Metro East side where they're close to their main distribution center. I think that's a big selling point. Secondly, I'd be open for them coming to Chicago. I want the jobs in Illinois. I don't want them to go to Wisconsin. I'm willing to do as governor whatever I have to do to bring business to Illinois. And you have to invest in order to attract. I will tell you that. I've done it. I've worked on it for 20 years. One of the largest distribution centers in all of Illinois is at the intersection of 111 and 270. Drive through southern Illinois and see it.
Thank you. Mr. Pritzker, how far should Illinois go?
Hello? Okay. If the benefits of a deal with Amazon do not inure to the benefit of the neighborhoods and of counties across the state of Illinois, it's not a good deal. Let's make sure that we are truly getting a payoff for the taxpayers. So whatever that benefit is that we give to try to bring the incentives, to try to bring companies to Illinois, which we should do, but you should only do it if it is truly inuring to the benefit of the taxpayers. And that means a real rate of return on the investment, the incentive that's being given. It's clear, though, that companies like Amazon, in part, have chosen Chicago and choosing Illinois because of work that I've done in building and founding 1871 to build up the technology infrastructure here in the city of Chicago and around the state of Illinois. It is important for us to have an ecosystem that fosters technology startups, and that's one of the very attractive features for Amazon thinking about Illinois.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kennedy, what about Amazon? Is there a limit on what Illinois should give to them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should start by closing their tax advantage. They shouldn't be able to sell into Cook County and not pay the taxes here. Collect and pay. It's a disadvantage for every retailer. Everybody who works in those stores now has shorter hours. The store owner has less revenue. The landlord gets less rent. The schools get less taxes. We're destroying our economy to accommodate a single company. This is no way to go about economic development in the United States. Giving out corporate welfare to bring people in to get in an auction. It's no way to elect a governor, and it's no way to fund an economy.
Senator Biss, could you respond? Yeah, we're getting down to the wire. We got to move a little faster.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. First of all, you introduced this question by talking about Ron Emanuel and Bruce Rauner holding a pep rally together. So there's going to be a lot of nightmares tonight. The question is, how much should we give Amazon? The answer is not much. The answer is, we need to look very, very, very closely at whatever they ask for, understand what they're going to be giving, not just in terms of jobs downtown, but all of Illinois. Understand the benefit to people in communities that have been the victims of disinvestment, not just for a few years, but for decades. Make sure that we ask that question, but also know this. The tax system that we have that is rigged by millionaires and billionaires against the rest of us is mirrored on the corporate side, where it's rigged by giant corporations that can hire lobbyists and to get headlines in the newspaper against small businesses and entrepreneurs. And so if we keep on playing this race to the bottom game and shoveling money toward the big corporations that get the headlines, we actually make Illinois less friendly to the kind of businesses that we want to see in order to have a thriving economy.
Thank you. Alderman Walker.
I have a problem with giving Amazon any money. See, the thing is, Amazon is a publicly traded company, so they have a legal responsibility to ask for as much as they can get. Government, on the other hand, has a different responsibility, which is not to report to shareholders, but to report to their constituents. Amazon is on the leading edge of automation. So they make things really cheap, but they put people out of work. Watch what's going to happen to Whole Foods. So what I've said is, look, if we can find $5 billion, $3 billion, $2 billion, whatever they're going to ask for Amazon, then match it with a new dollar for dollar, for public schools, or infrastructure, or economic development. If we can't find the money to match every dollar incentive that we offer them, then they shouldn't get a dime. And the other thing we should know is that the jobs that Amazon's creating in those warehouses aren't good jobs at all. They're 1099 employees with no benefits that pay $14 an hour. That's crap. So let's stop giving money to companies that automate, take jobs out of our companies, and put people out of business.
Mr. Pt2.
We need to look at this as an investment potential in Illinois. You know, if Amazon's gonna bring 50,000 jobs, we need to hold them to that. If they're gonna bring 60, we need to hold them to that. We did a disservice in Libertyville. Motorola said they were gonna, Quinn signed a bill, we're gonna give them they're gonna sign up for 5,000 jobs. The next year they sold to Google, next year they sold Lenovo. Guess what happened to those jobs? They disappeared. And 55% of our college students do not go to college in this state. Imagine if we had a huge second corporate warehouse within Illinois. Kids would want to stay here. We have a mass migration issue. You can say that's with taxes, you can say it's because they're not getting social services. That's a big opportunity for us to keep and invest and grow. And let's be honest, Washington's their first headquarters. What's legal in Washington? They're going to feel right at home once we pass the legalization of cannabis right here in Illinois.
All right, let's talk about a different issue, switching topics, police brutality. What's the role of the governor? What are your plans? And where do you stand when it comes to police demilitarization, de-escalation, the retraining to protect Illinois citizens, particularly people of color? What role does the governor play in this issue? Mr. Harden.
Okay, I'm going to take that one first. I'm the only candidate to stand up on this stage that stood up against police brutality here in Chicago and nationwide. Stood up when Laquan McDonald was executed, shot 16 times. Officer Jason Van Dyke tried to reload and shoot him another 16 times. I stood up to make sure Superintendent McCarthy got fired. A few other things happened, and as governor, I plan to really set up a task force to address the issue of police relations in communities of color. The police need a lot of de-escalation training. We need a lot of training, sensitivity training. So as the governor, I plan to lead that charge. The reality is that Mayor Rahm Emanuel is the last man. Mayor Rahm Emanuel was involved in a cover-up from the floor up, and this needs to go. And as governor also, I'm running for governor, I plan to make sure Mayor Rahm Emanuel does not win the next election as well. But let me say this to everybody out here. Police officers, and I got this from a seasoned police officer. He said police, when they're going through their training, for the first 90 days, they should not have a gun on them. They should get to know the people in the community. There's no evidence that dictates the fact that people are shooting at the police, so they should not be scared to go in communities of color and get to know the people. So as your governor, I plan to lead that charge.
Mr. Kennedy, where do you stand on this issue? What role does the governor have in police brutality?
I think the governor can stand up to the mayor, can stand up to what we're seeing going on in Chicago and frankly around the state as well. I've seen the videos. I've forced myself to watch them. I don't know what other videos might exist that they haven't shown us. I don't know what brutality exists that wasn't videoed. There's no faith in the police officers in our city here in Chicago from the community. That entire form of trust has broken down. We need to rebuild it with truth, with honesty, with candor, with accessibility. We need to strengthen Lori Lightfoot's committee, her role, give them teeth for enforcement. You can't have, if there's no transparency, then there can be no accountability. If there can be no accountability, there's no punishment. And the state of Illinois can come in and help with all of those.
Thank you. Mr. Pritzker?
So we need transparency and we need accountability, and the governor can be responsible for that. Because it is the data that gets collected on a county level, on a city level, that we need to enforce the collection of and make sure that we are evaluating it, all across the state. It's true that we've got the problem here in the city of Chicago, but it is also true across the county, 102 counties, this is an issue. So restoring transparency, accountability, bringing transparency and accountability, and then, very importantly, we need to require that there's true training. And I'm talking about use of force training, and I'm talking about cultural competency training to make sure that the police officers are, in fact, themselves beginning to rebuild trust with the community. You know that we have a real problem in this county, and that is that because the trust is lacking, we truly don't solve most of the crime that occurs because people in communities aren't willing to talk about it because they just don't trust the police.
Alderman Pawar? All right, could we please have a discussion? A discussion.
Criticism's fine. If you want police accountability, just know this. If a deal comes before city council that addresses the 13 reforms that Lori Lightfoot put out, I said, I stood with the Black Caucus and we voted down, and likely will get voted down. But then it goes to binding arbitration, and no changes will take place. That's why the next governor has to lead on making sure that statewide these FOP contracts are addressed so that the proper standards are in place. 2, a statewide Truth and Reconciliation Commission with reparations, so that we're actually having a conversation about what's happened to communities, not just today, not just yesterday, from a historical perspective. 3, the governor has the power of commutation. If I'm elected governor, we will commute the sentences of low-level, non-violent drug offenders and stop participating in a racist war on drugs. This is what I stand for. This is what I do.
Senator Biss.
I'm glad that you mentioned in the question militarization of the police, because I think it speaks to both a concrete problem, but also the basic wrong direction we're going in here. The attitude of militarization and the enormously divisive mechanism of law enforcement and our broader criminal justice system is the whole problem here. So we of course have to build community policing, and of course the state can enact laws that are very, very important when it comes to real accountability, when it comes to holding individuals accountable. By the way, there are still people incarcerated today who were convicted because of torture-tainted testimony. So the commutation power of the governor can be very useful there as well, not just to do justice, but also to demonstrate the consequences that come from the exercise of brutality on the part of the police force. But then, beyond that, we need to actually do the kind of wholesale reinvestment in communities and wholesale transformation of our criminal justice system that ensures that these issues are fundamentally about restoration and collaboration, not about attacks and militarization.
All right, let's talk about the image of this constant Chicago versus the rest of the state. Some believe that Governor Rauner's rhetoric has been toxic in this area. Can you, as governor, change the perspective and create a unified message between Chicago and the rest of the cities? That it's not Chicago versus downstate. Superintendent Tiber, why don't you begin?
Thank you, and that's exactly why I'm running. Because I believe there's more that unites us than divides us. And I've said this through my campaign, that everybody in Illinois wants good schools, they want safe neighborhoods, and they want good paying jobs. And I will tell you, I'm the first person in 20 years that has stood up from Southern Illinois to run for governor, because no one had the courage to do it, because they didn't think an everyday guy or someone from Southern Illinois could come to Chicago, be accepted, or even be listened to. So I decided to run to shrink the polarization of this state, to unite the state, to give everyone hope again in this state, that as a state we can progress forward, we can move forward as one state, not a state that's divided by a Chicago bailout like was talked about for education. I was the first to say, there is no bailout. It's for all of Illinois. We all need things, and we all need to strive for the best of what's the good for all the state. As governor, I can bring that unity together.
Mr. Paterkas, how will you create a more unified state rather than Chicago versus the rest?
State, look at the city of Chicago. We don't have a unified Chicago. The west and the south suburbs don't get the investment from Rahm Emanuel. But look at what we have right now. Peoria was surrounded by everything Caterpillar. We gave them a tax cut. We said Caterpillar's going to build $1 billion headquarters. New CEO comes in. We're going to move everyone up to Chicago. Rauner goes into that town. He's going to win that town because he can champion on that fact that, look, they're moving jobs from your communities into the city of Chicago.